Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the September 18th, 2018 work session of Methacton High School, Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. By way of attendance, we have all board members present except for Mr. Navarrete. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, Dr. Zerbe. And if you want me to cover for any parts of this, because I know you're recovering from illness, I'm happy to read over this.
I'll try to do my best. This evening, we have two presentations, and then on September 25th at the voting meeting. This meeting will occur in the auditorium here at the high school for the purpose of staff recognition and recognition of academic achievement by a number of students from the high school this past year in the presentation of our annual M Awards. So this evening we have two items. The first item being the master plan, additional summer 2019 work proposal. Mr. Fretz and the construction management team.
Sit on the edge like this. Hi, good evening. Before running into the master plan, just wanted to comment briefly. The projects are going fine. Everything's working out well at the high school. The roof project, remember we went through the roof repair. That's God willing, weather willing. I guess they're both connected. That hopefully by the end of this week that'll be finished. And the auditorium is still tracking, scheduling to finish on time. So I just thought I'd bring that up. We talked at length in the property committee meeting about the sourcing of documents that starts from the original master plan through the workbook, through all of the documents that track that and report and follow up from a cost standpoint through today. So there was kind of a lengthy discussion with a track record summary and handouts of the respective documents that'll basically answer the question. Someone on the board had asked a question, how do we follow up on an item that appears on the master plan in 1 year? For example, what happens to it? Is it completed? Where did it went? When is it being completed? And we reviewed that in property. So I just wanted to touch base briefly on that. Any questions about that before I move off of that and get to the master plan? Okay, thank you. The reason why we're here tonight is, you might recall back in July we had presented the slate of work that was being proposed for the 2019 scope of work, year 2 of the master plan, and some of that work was approved, the majority of it was approved, and some of it was bumped back to committee for further discussion, and about $2 million worth of work. And we reviewed that in committee this past month. And again, just in context, all you do is you approve the work that's being targeted. Then we have to go through all the process of carving it up, putting it out for RFPs, and coming back to you with proposals for your subsequent awards. So we have a fairly lengthy process there. But we went back to property. There were two major items that it was decided collectively that we should bring them back to property next month and revisit them. So that's what's going to happen to those items. And then what we have to present tonight, which is a smaller portion, is the work that was unanimously approved by property. So Mark's going to run through those items.
Thank you. Good evening. So to review the balance of the proposed 2019 scope for the board to consider and to ultimately vote on at the next meeting. The first item was a clean agent extinguishing system listed as EV32 on the FAS study. This document, I believe, if you don't have it in front of you, I believe you have had it sent to you via email. So the first one was EV32, clean agent, and it was it came up in the FAS about eliminating the wet sprinkler systems in the main data room, and that's what we were requesting to move forward with the engineer to assess and create a bid package to work so we can commence that work in 2019 in the summer. That work amount, I believe, is considered at $31,500. We also had at Woodland replace a loft ladder. There's no second floor, but there's a ladder to a mechanical loft there, and it was recommended the ladder is very steep, and that we're looking at being able to make a safer ladder that will go up to that area. So we're going to be requesting to move forward with that replacement, and we have $21,000 slated for that. We have Woodland WD-23. It's an HVAC system to the IDF, which is an intermediate data closet. It has minimal cooling and an exhaust fan that has some issues. We're looking to move forward with the engineer and create a bid package, so we'll be able to complete that in the summer of 2019 for, I think we have $43,900 slated there. We have a Skyview Arcola, item 24. We were looking to research the existing documents that had to do with asbestos removal in mechanical rooms to make sure that we had what we needed, much like we did with the work that we had in the at the roofs when we went and we did some further investigation to make sure we were on top of our game there with having everything in alignment as we move forward with any other kind of work there. And that amount, I think we have $5,000 there for that. We had high school 21A, 21B, and 21C. They all revolved around accessibility and code concerns with, and doing some research really around this. The one was exterior doors at the back, the step down from the landing of the building. We're requesting to move forward with retaining consultant and create a bid package for that work. That's towards above the stadium field there where you come out of the building where you have a step down, and that's an issue today as far as the codes go. We also had a doors leading to courtyard from the corridor by the pool area. We have a lot of gym mats that we want to be taken care of and properly stored. You've all probably seen around the building. We're looking at doing an enhancement there and basically taking a storage room that was from an old pool pump and adding doors to that room to be able to use it as a storage room that will help. It's kind of like in the courtyard, a little squared out section kind of outside of the building, but it's connected to the building. So by opening that wall, we'll be able to take these mats and be able to put them in there and get them out of the main building proper where, they are today. So that's a good thing. We have $31,500 there to be able to handle that. There were 2 bathrooms up in the second floor of the high school over, I believe it's on the east section. Those bathrooms, there are no fixtures there anymore. We're looking at being able to put those fixtures back. Talked with Mr. Sorgini about it. It's something that he wanted to make sure that we were doing to get that straightened back out and getting the fixtures and the toilets and everything back up and get those bathrooms up and running. At the high school, number 38 was to replace an indoor grease receptor. This was in the main kitchen floor area. These units are deteriorated and in time for the replacement. So that's something the team was requesting to move forward with that again to create a package so we could take care of that work and probably the associated tile right around those areas and get them straightened out. High school number 40 was replace sprinklers, again with clean agent systems. These are, a flooding system that would extinguish a fire if we ever had or a failure electrically in one of those spaces, and it's important because it will put it out and hopefully get the fire out, but also retain the other electronics that we have in those spaces without having damage to them. So that's an important thing to be considered and to add to it, and that we have $46,750. We have a district-wide sidewalk and pavement assessment. We were looking to do the study that would identify, much like we have done with the roofs, to look at the asphalt and concrete areas around the exterior of the building and to be able to identify the problems that would be associated with them and trying to prioritize it so we can figure out what the spend would be in an organized fashion through the study and be able to do it just like the roofs where we had them graded and that we'd be able to move forward with the project. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I didn't ask this at the property, but I assume that the high school 21C includes one of the post-prom quote closets.
Yes.
Is for the warning of the post-prom committee, what is the alternative for, I understand because I've been,
Yeah.
a lot of turpentine and so forth
Yeah.
in there, but what is the solution for post-prom organization?
Well, I think the solution will have to come up with some ulterior storage. Right now, we did create this one where we're talking about putting the mats down there. There may be some other room once we put in down there for some of that thing. But, I mean, it's an issue and all over for many different things here, and it's a big concern to me as I go around, and we're constantly trying to be creative. Like right now, a lot of things that we have done, have done and moved things out, cleaned up to try to get rid of the stuff we don't need, but also we're utilizing a little bit down at Autobahn right now. So it's something we have to keep talking about.
And the other one, Mark, just real quick, on the district-wide, and I'm supportive of doing it, but I'm just wondering, is there anything we have to decide on traffic flow in the meantime as part of this, along with this? We had talked about trying to improve the high school traffic flow. We've talked about potentially trying to Arcola Skyview, and that would also influence the paving requirements.
Well, there's definitely, we all know the issues as we go around with parking, and we talked about this past. We did a phase 1 study. If we remember back, we did a phase 1 at the high school where we came up with some narratives with it, and we had requested about doing a phase 2. And I think at that time, it didn't come up with, we had to get the data. That was about collecting data with traffic flows and counts and all that kind of stuff to be able to get a traffic data collection group in here. So we still have that proposal that we could be able to move forward if you so chose to do that, but we did not do that at this point, so that's kind of been on hold. As far as the stuff that
Let me just add to that. If we recall, it was on hold because of uncertainty around transportation and its potential skewing of the data associated with the way transportation was running at the time. So while, for the most part, transportation started off on a very good foot this year, it would be something that we would consider maybe bringing back to the property committee for consideration, and then to the full board to revisit those studies.
Thank you, Dr. Zermi. We could bring that back to property next month if you so chose.
Just want to touch base on that same one, the high school 21C, the 2 bathrooms. You have budgeted here $110,000. I've only been in one of those rooms, but is that a realistic amount for that? I mean, I would expect to see that number possibly higher than that. Are we being...
Well, I think it is realistic. Right now, I haven't done the study. The one thing I would want to do is try to do an analysis a little bit on the lines and make sure they're good. I'd hate to put them in and then find out that there was an issue, that somehow they were deteriorated or leaking or something like that. I hope that that's not the case, but I have to do that. I do know that we have enough dollars there right now, fixture-wise, and it's not that much, but it's the plumber. It's, doing some unforeseen stuff is there right now. So I do think we have enough there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no other questions, continue to review the document. We'll put this on the agenda for your consideration and approval next week. Thank you, Mr. Fretz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sakala. Next on the agenda, and for the board's information, there is a handout in front of you this evening. Dr. Angstad is here to present REACH, Raising Expectations and Children's Hopes. It's a program recommendation, and in context of why we're bringing this forward, we started having a number of conversations following sometime around February, March of last year. In the research that was conducted, it was around May or June that we started having conversations in a more intense manner. We shared with the Education Committee of the board our interest in doing this, but timing-wise, to fit this into the budget. We just couldn't make it connect. However, the Education Committee did recommend that we continue to proceed forward for the sheer value in the presentation that Dr. Engstad will share with you this evening, and we would like your consideration for approval next week. Dr. Engstad?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I would like to share with the board a brief overview of the intensive mental health supports that has been discussed with the Education Committee for the past several months. As Dr. Zerbe mentioned, beginning in February 2018, a core team of people here in Methacton, Dr. Pagano, Tara Rickey, Jen Johnson, Danny Faustin, and Dr. Gavanese and I went on site visits, we did research, we met with multiple providers to say who could provide the best support to us. We saw that there was increased needs in mental health. We're not the only one experiencing that. Look across the United States, look in Pennsylvania, you'll see sharp increases all the way around. And we wanted to find someone who could provide this level of care for our students. So we did a little digging, met with, like I said before, many different providers to see who would be the best fit and who could come in and customize what we here in Methacton needed rather than buying a packaged program. Like, who could we work with and make it our program based on what our students needed. We are pleased tonight to recommend to you that we have selected a person that we would like to partner with. Springfield Psychological is an organization that has over 30 years of experience working with school districts. They also provide similar supports to this in other districts in Chester County, Delaware County, and Montgomery County. And the important piece that I would like to share with you about this therapeutic support is it provides a level of care to those that are most needy, students with more significant mental health, behavioral challenges, emotional needs, so that students can stay here in Methacton School District getting the therapeutic support they need and participating in our academic and extracurricular activities. We named this program REACH. We wanted children to feel like they had hopes and that they were going to be given opportunities to grow within their own district and not feel isolated or needing to go somewhere else because they've done something wrong. It's about providing hope to kids, and that's kind of what this program would do. This program involves daily group counseling and therapy to students that are involved in the program. It can involve individual counseling as well as phone access after school hours if kids are in crisis and need support. There is family therapy available as part of this program, so if parents want to join in and come into the school setting or evening appointments, they're available as well. There is also coordination with outside and community supports, so if parents are working with another agency and they have wraparound services, there is a tight coordination between all those service providers so that the home and school and those outside providers can all work together to provide that continuity of care. And then the other additional piece of this support is support for our staff. Professional development is built into the agreement, not only for the support staff at Arcola where we plan to implement the program, but for district-wide staff as well. What else can I share with you? I would like to introduce to you Dr. Vince Bellward. He is the director of the practice at Springfield Psychological. He will be working directly with our core team as well as the people that they would bring on board to help provide this service. The service includes, just so you're aware of what the monies associated with this provides, 2 mental health specialists in our building, mental health clinicians on a daily basis. There is a clinical coordinator to supervise the clinical staff and provide administrative support. On a daily basis, teachers would have access to these professionals, so if they had questions about how to handle something in their classroom, there would be some on-site training for them. There, as I mentioned earlier, there would be professional development for the district staff, And then we, as administrators, there will be a building team. I will be participating in meetings throughout the year to ensure that the range of services that are being provided are meeting the needs of our students. This is, and I'm sure Dr. Mangano and Dr. Bellward would agree, it's a work in progress. So we have to hire the staff. We still have a timeline, which I'll review in a few minutes, but we have to secure the staff, bring them in, develop the program for implementation, and get the ball rolling. So we have a lot of little pieces to work on at this point. In the little handout I gave you, I also talked about some of the challenges that students currently face. These are the types of challenges, whether it's suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, eating or substance abuse, eating disorders, substance abuse, attendance issues, school avoidance, academic failure, aggressive behaviors at school or at home, and then also conflict outside of the school environment and problems with peer-teacher relationships. These are the types of things that we will be looking at when we're identifying who are the students that would best benefit from this type of programming. The program would allow for a total caseload at Arcola of 18 to 20 students. We anticipate that it would be fluid in nature, so someone may get identified and we could see that, you know what, they're doing really well and they could be exited from the program and somebody new could come into the program. Again, we're hoping that this program will not only improve attendance and decrease referrals for discipline, but also decrease symptoms and provide these students that are at this very vulnerable age when they're in 7th and 8th grade with some of the coping strategies they need, and really trying to prepare them and be more proactive in helping them address the needs that they have. It is all a positive-based system. There's nothing punitive about this. Parents must consent in order to participate in the program. But we really felt that it would give a level of care to our students that currently we need to place out. And there's some stigma associated with not being in your home school, and we wanted to be able to provide that level of support here and try and help them the best we can. So, do you have any questions for me? I kind of just skimmed through the slides as opposed to reading them to you directly, but
I don't have any questions because we've asked you dozens of questions over the last few Education Committee meetings, but I did want to speak on behalf of the Education Committee and thank you and your team for all this groundwork. I did have a board member reach out to me to ask me about it, and my comment was, this is one of the best things I've seen happen since I've been on the board, if the board so approves. As I was typing my education minutes last night, I'm typing them saying, REACH is coming to the board for approval, and I was typing out what REACH stood for, and I feel like that's what we're all here to do, is to help these children, and I really appreciate all the work that went into it. And I would like to reiterate that this has been successful in a couple districts. And as an educator myself, now teaching 7th grade, I know how big this need is, and I hope the board will support us in that. And lastly, Mr. Winters and I, being on the committee together, spoke briefly before the meeting. We were both smiling that this presentation was happening and grateful. And we hope that you'll all agree.
Any other questions? Mike?
Just two quick questions. Thank you very much for getting this together. I agree with Andrea. I was the board member who reached out to see how this was received by the committee, and glowing reviews, and this all looks fantastic. I just want to clarify, how many students at a given time?
18 to 20. So the 2 counselors, the 2 therapists that will be there, each can have 10 on a caseload max. And I didn't mention this, but it is in the slides. There is a minimum of 2 daily contacts with that student in addition to group therapy. If they need individual counseling, that's provided. We gave it the name REACH so that when it's scheduled, it's actually part of the student's schedule, is how it will be built in, and they will be assigned to a REACH group. And we were trying to make it as positive as possible for students to want to participate in it. I did not go over the budgetary consideration slide, Dr. Zerbe. Did you want me to speak to that at all? Okay, so on the one page, there was information about the budget. It is a 2-year proposal with Springfield Psychological. This first year was prorated. We anticipate starting in November, but it depends on Springfield Psychological being able to secure the therapists that are appropriate for our building. This amount could be adjusted if we don't start in November. But right now, that amount is $133,650. That includes the 2 therapists, the clinical coordinator, the supervision and support for us as we're developing the program. Professional development for both district staff, we've included 12 hours for this year, as well as any family-based counseling services that are needed. That's all provided. There are some additional things in the agreement that if we have overflow for psychological or psychoeducational evaluations, we can reach out to Springfield to help us with some of that overflow work. And it also gives us access to child psychiatrists if we need psychiatric evaluations completed. And that is a welcomed addition because there are times when you need that and you can't find someone to conduct them for you. The second year, the program increases. That's a full year price that you saw there of $171,650, and that was based on the full year plus a 2.75% increase. Again, that's for a full year. If we would want to have services during ESY, that is also an option. That would be a separate agreement and a separate cost based on participation for that programming. But some of our kids would benefit from having counseling year-round. If that would be the case, we would make those recommendations as their ESY programming if they would need that.
If I could just add some of the budget considerations. So part of where we are, it's clear, as I tried to articulate earlier, that we did not budget for this program. So I just want to make that clear. So your approval next week will take on a number of things. First of all, there's an agreement that we're working on in terms of a contract between us and the service provider. Our solicitor is currently reviewing that, and once that's confirmed to be in line with our proper mechanisms, we'll move forward with that if, in fact, and we'll post it if, in fact, it's ready for next week. If not, it will be finalized and reviewed based on the solicitor's final review and recommendation. So that's item number one. Item number two, we are applying as a district for the competitive grant funds under the I believe it's the safety under crime and delinquency grant. So there's 2 parts of that. There's the non-competitive, we'll call it, grant that we're using, which will be about $25,000 towards improving and supporting our district-wide video security. But the competitive portion, we're trying to offset this. Now, there's no guarantee that we'll get that competitive portion, but we want you to know that we're applying for money to support it. So with that said, for this year, we would recommend that it can be covered under the budget in terms of the budgetary reserve that we have budgeted. There's $200,000 in there. Now, that budgetary reserve would not necessarily be addressed if not needed. So what that means is we would create the accounts within the system, and we would draw from the budgetary reserve if, in fact, it's needed, probably closer to the end of the fiscal year. But in the meantime, there were, as you know, there are ups and downs in a budget year, and we may be able to actually cover some of the cost within other budgetary categories as we review that. But as a safeguard, and for your understanding and consideration for this first-year program, we think it, at the very least, can be covered under the budgetary reserve. For the second year, it would be something that, again, if approved next week, it would be something that we would work into the annual budgeting process, and it would become, a fixed mechanism within the budget. Are there any questions budgetarily or financially in terms of being able to move this program forward? No. Okay. Any other budget questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to clarify with what you said there. In terms of, we do have the money in the budgetary reserve to cover it, but we're still going to identify specific line codes. I'm kind of looking at Tim here to make sure that this program is covered and easily identifiable, that we're not going to cover bits and pieces from each thing and not really see the total cost of this program. Okay.
There'll be separate budget codes for it, and there'll be recommended transfers if in time. Yeah, and you'll see, just like we normally would for any other program.
Just want to clarify there. I do have one other question, but it's not budget.
No problem.
I have a question. Is the grant, the school safety grant, that's a one-time grant then that would try to
Yeah, both
cover
the competitive
first?
and non-competitive appear to be one-time grants. Any other budgetary questions? Okay, then other questions for Dr. Angstead on the program?
Just one last question about it. Assuming that the board does agree to move forward with this program, what have we identified as a way to keep track of this over the 2 years to see about the effectiveness of it, to be able to see if this is a program that at the end of the 2 years, would we want to continue it? Would we want to grow it? Along those lines.
We have certain data points, so we will have program goals that once we meet as a team and work with them in our partnership, we will be developing goals. We also plan at the end of the year to survey staff, students, and families to get feedback from them about how the program was working. And we'll also look at participation rates. Do students come to group sessions? Are they participating the way they should be participating in the meetings? It's important for us to say in our first year especially, let's see what we're doing, let's see how it's going, and if we need to make adjustments, make those adjustments over the summer for the implementation of the second year. Springfield Psychological will also work with us, so we may have already said, okay, we have a list of students we think may need the service. They will also work with us to make sure we're identifying the correct students for the program and making sure that the needs of those kids are being considered every step of the way. So,
Thank you very much.
Mr. Winters?
I have a couple questions. Thank you for bringing this to the attention of the Education Committee.
Sure.
I've enjoyed hearing about it, and I think this is going to be a great program if we can approve this for Arcola. I have a question about when a student comes into the program, is there a waiver or something that's signed in case there is sort of a outcome that's maybe more negative than is hoped for, that would protect the district from liability of that?
So all parents, as I said before, have to agree to participate in the program. So all of that information will be covered in those parent meetings when we're first starting up with the student. There's daily, almost daily, is that correct? Daily communication with parents, or at least multiple times a week.
If parents are willing.
Yeah, if parents are willing, there's open communication and dialogue with parents throughout the week, so that, calls home, letting people know how things are going. And it's really to build that homeschool connection and get parents involved.
And then the after-hours possibility of support with the family, is that, I would think that would be limited to a certain number of time slots or something, and then is that also, that's what I understood, it is included in the package price, and it's not a per fee?
That's correct.
Additional?
It's included, and then what happens is parents have to want to participate in it.
Okay.
So it's reaching out. Parents could come in during the school day if they wanted to meet with the counselor and the student together.
Okay, and my last question, I think, is about identifying students who are currently at Arcola versus those who have been placed out already, and kind of weighing who, is it just by as need, or who you think you can be most effective with helping?
We feel it would be both. Students that are currently out that could come back into the district, and I call it coming home, or students that are at Arcola that need this level of support. And we really I probably didn't tap on it, but the reason we selected Arcola is just because they're at that impressionable age where giving them these strategies in advance would just really help to foster their own self-esteem, and that's kind of what we wanted to do, is provide them with those mechanisms.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Any other questions down on this side? No? Paul?
I just want to, again, also thank you all for being involved with this. And I know, Amy, that you've been working hard on doing more. And I think there's one point that Dr. Engstead I just want to add is the mental health acceptance for those not also. So the 2 grades that the other 650 students that are not involved in the program, and how to develop the mental health acceptance skills in those as well. So that was one of the benefits that we saw in this in Springfield, is that the support in those assemblies or whatever we want to do.
Correct.
It's a key aspect. It's not just for these 18 or 20 students.
That's correct.
It's for the whole school.
And I think it's also important to talk about just the district-wide PD and how that can benefit all of our staff and helping them feel a little more secure in how to work with kids that have mental health needs or depression and anxiety. And I think that will be a benefit to everybody.
Other questions?
I agree. I'm thrilled to see that we're bringing this to Methacton. When I first heard about it, I thought it feels like this is a proactive move on the part of our district, and I'm really encouraged to see that. I know that the specifics of the agreement are still being worked out, but one of the things that I wanted to clarify is how specific is the agreement? Are we quantifying services? Is there flexibility built into the agreement? So if a student needs something, I don't want to see us in a situation where the student could really benefit from X service, but it only specifies in the agreement that we would provide Y service, so that we end up with gaps in what we can offer. So is there...
There's lots of flexibility. The only thing specified in the agreement is the total hours of PD that are provided. So if we want to go over those hours of PD, then there's a fee associated, an hourly rate associated with that. And then if we're using any of the psychiatric services, there's a stated fee of what they would cost to our families, or if we're paying for that, what we would be paying. In addition to, there's an agreement to do a community event at a specific hourly rate to provide something for the community during the... Other than that, it's about what the students need and how we're best meeting those needs.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions? So if it's okay with the board, we'll add this to the agenda. If the agreement is ready for your review, we'll have it attached to the agenda. If not, we will make sure that it's worded appropriately to move this project forward based on the timeline that Dr. Engstead has laid out here in trying to get the service as soon as possible, but somewhere in the neighborhood of November.
Yes, and I will continue to keep the Ed Committee updated on our progress.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Engstead. That ends the presentations and recognition of guests and scheduled speakers for this evening. The rest of the agenda is as followed. We will appoint new student board representatives, so students will take the oath of office next week. We will have the committee reports. Just be noted that, and we'll note it again later in the agenda, but the policy meeting actually meets next week and just before the board meeting. So that will, we may see items on the agenda that relate to policy as a result of that meeting that aren't there this evening. There'll be public comments on action items. There'll be requested approval of the minutes, and then we'll go on to fiscal items. We have Mr. Bricker this evening to go over a list of bills, treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, and student activity account. Mr. Bricker?
Tonight, we'll have the list of bills for approval on the 25th, the treasurer's report. There are no budgetary transfers. They cannot occur until October. And we will have a student activity account. There's to approve the establishment of the Methacton class of 2022, also not added to this agenda, but will be added to the voting session, will be the closing of the Methacton High School classes student activity accounts of 2016, 2017, and 2018. These are both in District Board Policy 618.
Any questions for Mr. Bricker?
Yeah, on that last item, there was discussion at the Finance Committee about remaining balances in those class accounts from 16, 17, and 18. Is there anything in a policy or other kind of guidelines that tell how those funds are supposed to be disposed of?
I would have to go back and look at 618, but I don't believe I remember seeing anything. Otherwise, we just would have done that. There's really nothing there. The recommendation is to spread it out among the 4 classes that are currently there.
And where does that recommendation come from?
Myself.
From yourself, okay. And then are we putting a mechanism in place for like the end of this school year, for this class? When you get to like April, even March maybe?
Well, it's a student activity account, so I don't control it. It's up to them and their sponsor to make sure they spend all the money that's in the accounts.
But can somebody, the sponsor,
Push 'em?
give them a little nudge to
Yeah,
make
what
sure?
actually should be done, and has been done in other instances, is the club determines near the end of the year and prior to the end of the school year what the remaining balance will be used for, and they send a letter to our office, and then we would disperse it that way. Because the club can decide to disperse the money, but now there's no officers, so this is kind of
But
cleanup.
somebody could put on their calendar to send that notice to them, whether
I'll
I'm
take
in your
care of it.
office or where, just so we don't have this.
Well, I think we
going
want to put
forward.
it, we just distributed the activities manual, and I think we'll add it to that as a annual recommendation for it to be reviewed. Thank you. Any other questions on?
On Dr. Zerbe on the minutes, I will be going back. I appreciate Mary there's some more details on the minutes, but I do have a couple adjustments that I'll be going back to.
Very much. Any other questions for Mr. Bricker? If not, on the personnel items, we have a number of items. And then at the end of, I asked Mr. Regina to just comment briefly and summarize, where we are enrollment-wise and class size-wise.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. I'll pass actually these down, Paulie. Thank you. A number of the items for the board's consideration this evening. For resignations under classified, we have 2 items. I know we had asked, as we see resignations in this area, that we note where the individuals might be moving on to. Of course, the first one is a retirement. The second one is Michael Santiago, and Michael is moving on to better opportunities. And Michael's been a permanent fixture here, I believe, for 13 years for all of you, so we just want to thank Michael for his years of service. So, Michael, thank you. Under establishment for new positions, we are looking to establish a .5 reading specialist position at Eagleville, and this funding has been broken down for you in that item as well. Under uncompensated leaves, we do have 3 items this evening. In supplemental contracts, we do have 7 items this evening. For volunteers, there are 1 item, and in community education, there is 1 item. Now, if the board we can review the enrollment, or would we like to take questions first?
I just had one question. I know you're waiting for approval, but I was just curious if we have posted the reading specialist yet, or has there been any movement on yet, or are you waiting for us?
We're waiting for some movement here. Thank you.
Any other questions on the personnel items before Mr. Gina goes on to enrollment? Yeah, that's down here.
I just want to make sure, are all the activities, currently we have all coaches in place? I hear that we may not be, and I just want to, sorry.
No, it's a good question. We actually, our last fall coach that we were looking for is actually on this agenda. We were awaiting updated clearances, but we will hopefully have that in place here at the end of this week.
A parent asked, do we have cheerleading for Arcola? Cheerleading coach? That was the only one that came up. Just if we could look into making sure we have everything filled out. Because as far as I know, some students had asked, they haven't even had tryouts yet, and they were just concerned.
I'll make note of that and have an update next week. Yep.
Are there any other comments on personnel items? If not, Mr. Regina handed out an updated enrollment report. You want to review that with the board?
In the enrollment report, it's one similar that you've seen probably at the end of each week from Dr. Zerbe. Really what we'll be looking at is the numbers have plateaued as we had expected at this point. Woodland had still been over on 3 seats total, so that's 1 in each classroom. But our first grade had leveled off, as had our second grade. We're seeing some enrollment people coming in at this point. They're trickling in, and we're making the appropriate accommodations to make sure that our class sizes maintain the level that we're hoping them to stay at.
Any questions for Mr. Regina on enrollment?
Just one question, kind of a follow-up to previous conversations that we had. There was a comment made that, sometimes we see these numbers kind of spike in the beginning of the school year, and then we'll start to see, a slight decline in that. We're not really seeing the decline. We've plateaued or seen one or two more trickle in. Is that a fair statement?
What we've noticed, so Worcester was initially in kindergarten, was 3 over. That's gone down to 0. Woodland had an additional one that was also over, which has gone down. So I want to say between first grade and kindergarten, and I wouldn't want to quantify it without looking at the numbers for sure, but I think that we've probably seen a reduction in about 10 students, which has balanced out our numbers. But Mike, I'd like to probably take a look at that to confirm that that's accurate.
Okay, yeah, it looks like the kindergarten number, at least the 278, I think is consistent with what it's been in the past, but I'm not sure about that first grade number.
And this doesn't include this includes all students that are currently enrolled, even from last year. So once we meet the 10-day point and Ms. Johnson, our homeschool visitor, does the appropriate checks, there may be other withdrawals that are done in the system. Any other questions for Mr. Regina? If not, we'll go on to curriculum and programs. Dr. Katona?
Okay, thank you. We'll be looking for approval for the ELA curriculum for grades K through 5, which has been broken out for you to summarize K through 2 and 3 through 5.
Other questions for Dr. Katona? If not, we'll move on to policy. As I mentioned briefly earlier, our policy meeting is next week, so there may be items that may come before you that would be listed under first reading for consideration. Then under other, we have gifts, donations, and sponsorships. There are 2 listed. To accept the donation from Don and Sue Sawyer to be used for the backpack program. The value of the gift is $100. The second is to accept an agreement of sponsorship between Merck Sharp and Dome Federal Credit Union and the Methacton School District, and the agreement will be attached for your consideration. It is not attached for this evening. For the right to place a banner on the stadium field. So I believe at each person's place there is a handout, and it would look like this. And there's 2 pieces of paper that I want to reference. The first one is what the actual sign will look like. It's the approved sign by the party and the one that we would be recommending for your approval. And then the second one kind of depicts the location. So the sign that's listed on the location was done earlier than the sign on the first page. So if there's some wording changes, it's the sign on the first page that you'll be approving. And I just wanted to reference the location. So this is the first banner. This is I think it's like an acrylic type banner that will be placed on the field during the seasons and then pulled off and stored on the off seasons, usually during the winter months. And this will be the first on the fields. Please know that also that the banner will not be facing in towards the field. It'll be facing out on the other side. It was originally thought that it would be facing in, but based on our conversations and the best use of marketing, it's better to face it up towards the audience than it is in towards the players. I know it's an obvious, but that wasn't what that isn't what the vendor wanted in the first place. And this is our first or our second vendor as part of the overall sign and revenue process that we've been going through. But it is the first banner. So are there any questions about that? The agreement will likely be almost exactly the same, except for the terms. The terms of this will be $5,000 for 4 years. Now, I know that if it's a little different than the $25,000 for 10 years, which was the scoreboard, but every every area that's going to be sold as a potential area for advertisement will have its different values and different terms, and we shared that in a memo with the board just recently. We also want you to be aware that our sales force will be our student body, those that are involved in activities, band, any of the activities or the sports clubs. If they're able to, sell the particular advertisements, we have noted in our internal document that those clubs will receive a portion or a cut of the sale of the banner going forward. So, we think that's a good way to do it rather than having me or one of my administrators, going out knocking on doors, because likely our students have just as many connections through their parents and the people that they know than we do. So any questions on this particular matter or anything related to the sign?
Just one quick question in terms of the storage of these. You mentioned taking them down at the end of the season or whatever. Do we have somewhere designated? I know storage can be an issue, especially with things like these as they get more and more and larger banners. Do we have somewhere designated to put these?
We don't at this point.
Okay, could you keep us up to date on that?
Absolutely. Well, part of the challenge we have on most of our campuses is storage. As you see, the last thing I would want to do is put more sheds on the high school campus. We have quite a few. But there are certain restrictions that prevent us from doing maybe something more elaborate. But with that said, we will have a designated space for this and make sure that these things are well taken care of. Any other questions?
Is there a particular account or activity for which this revenue is earmarked?
Actually, we did not make that determination with the Finance Committee yet. So that is certainly something that we need to determine how we're going to not only, document the revenue, but also determine what revenue will be used for. So while we're just rolling this out now, I think that can get on the agenda for the Finance Committee in October and have a recommendation for the board. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to number 15, dates for board members' calendars. They're as listed. Then there's old business, new business, and I'll turn it over to the board president.
All right, thank you, Dr. Zerbe. At this point, I'll open it up to courtesy of the floor.
Can I just one quick question?
Oh,
kind
I'm
of an
sorry.
Old business update. We went through it really quick. I've never understood the process. How do we identify the student board representatives? How are they chosen? Just a matter of curiosity.
Mr. Regina, how are the two student board representatives chosen?
The recommendations come from the high school principals, and we get involved with the process at that point, go down and meet with them, go over the guidelines. But I think that's chosen by the high school principals, Dr. Sorgini, and I believe Mrs. Kratnus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just two things. And at this point, are you able to share any information about the enrollment study update? As far as the status, I mean, there were some questions that were raised about it, and there's...
Yeah, so there were some questions that we received from members of the public regarding enrollment, the original enrollment document that we had received from Mylona McBroom, which we haven't presented, which is planned to be presented as soon as I get a revised schedule and plan for the board to see. But with that, there was I shared those concerns that were shared with me from the public with Mylona McBroom, and they had provided me with an update to that report based on the concerns that were shared with them from the public. So we have that, and that will likely be the document now that we'll move forward with as part of an overall presentation on the future decision-making process for Arrowhead Elementary School.
And then one other item, it was on the agenda from the Finance Committee meeting from the 11th, was the preliminary results from 2017-18. If you have that information, if not, could we get on the agenda for next week?
Yes, so what we did this evening was, or actually later this afternoon, we provided that report in draft format to the members of the Finance Committee. So you have that in an email. And we're asking that you spend the next couple of days, if possible, reviewing that, making sure that it's in line with some of the questions that you would have, so that prior to going to the full board with a presentation, we have it kind of eyed that is meeting the needs of at least the folks that are detailed on the finance side. So if the members of the Finance Committee could take a look at that and get questions to Mr. Bricker, we can have that prepared and presented at next week's meeting.
Okay, I haven't seen that email yet. If it came out this afternoon. Does that include?
I think around 3 or 4 o'clock.
Okay. Does that include any sort of analysis on positive, negative variances? And
Yeah,
I guess I'll take a look
Mr.
at it.
Bricker goes through I think it's about 3 or 4 pages long, 4 pages. He does go over the revenue, and he does go over the expenditures. Expenditures are probably about 3 pages long, revenue is about a page long. So with that said, I think it provides some reasonable detail. Now that's, also considering that, we have an audit being done that will either confirm or deny what we're estimating, but nonetheless, it is a projection that we intended to have to the board sooner, but with some of the other matters that we were paying attention to in terms of transportation and the way we wanted to utilize our time, it was best said.
Okay, no, I understand that. I'll take a look at what you said.
All right, thank you very much.
Anything else before we move on? All right, so now we'll open it up to courtesy of the floor. Dr. Malik.
Mind if I give you something before I start? I'll give you something before I start. Guys get them? Did they get them? Jim Malik, Worcester. Did I hear that Dr. Zerbe provides the board with a weekly enrollment update? Is that what I heard?
I'm not certain if that's correct.
Well, that's what I heard the gentleman over here say. But I can always do a right-to-know request. Can we get an update on the Shannondale litigation?
We can't discuss litigation in public, not when it's out.
Certainly can. Certainly can. I don't see why not. It's a public record. There's a docket, which you didn't provide at the last meeting. That's why I handed you what I handed you. There's a public docket. Is it listed for trial? You can tell us that. It's in the docket. See, the reason I gave you what I gave you the first document, Board Policy 006. At the last meeting, you announced an executive session for some nebulous entity, Methacton versus something, LDH, LND, but you never provided a docket. And according to Board Policy 006, you're supposed to provide the docket number. Did you know that? It's right here. Page 5 of what I gave you, your board policy. So what I had to do is go through the public docket and try to find whatever you announced. So you violated the Sunshine Law and your board policy. Because the other page I gave you is from John Reba from your new law firm. He puts it out here, right here in a email.
I'm going to correct you right there. I don't believe that Mr. Reba is with Sweet Stevens at this time.
Well, he was. And he also put it in a letter, which is a memo of law. And it also went into the settlement agreement, which was the basis for Board Policy 006. So not only did you violate the board policy, but you violated the settlement agreement. So what I could do is go to court and have it enforced. So can you tell me the docket number of the case?
I don't have any information to share with you at this time.
Okay. We violated board policy, you violated the settlement agreement, you violated the Sunshine Law. This isn't the first time, because at the 7/16 meeting, you announced a personnel issue. And according to your board policy, you have to announce personnel issue with specificity, which you wanted to ask your solicitor, but it's right here in your board policy. Now, the only board policy you know is the 4-minute rule, but it's right here on page 6. That's the second time. It's also in the settlement agreement. It's also in the Sunshine Law. Now, eventually, enough is going to be enough, and you're going to get sued. Not only you, but all these folks too. So the public docket says the case is listed for trial. Do you guys know that? Dr. Zerbe, do you know it's listed for trial? Is there a trial date for this case? Because a trial precipice was filed, it's listed for trial, so everything you've told me about this case is wrong. It's not out there years away. Back in November of 2017, it was listed for trial.
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
I'll wrap up. Now I'm objecting under 710.1C because you guys violated the Sunshine Law. And you're lying to the public about the status of the case. And the question is, why are you lying to the public? Do you know something we don't know?
Dr. Malik, I don't have information to share with you on this case.
Well, I'm under the assumption that you know the case is listed for trial.
That would be information that our solicitor who's handling that case would provide to us.
Right.
And if the solicitor hasn't provided that to us, then I'm not sure what to tell you about that.
Well, I'm sure he has, because it's in the public docket. I shared it with Mr. Earnshaw in the Finance Committee. And if you don't know, it's a serious problem. If you do know, it's more of a serious problem.
I agree, Dr. Malik, and your time is up.
And that's why I said there should be a plan. And if you don't want to share that with the public, there's something wrong up there.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Can I get a motion to adjourn, please? And a second? Meeting adjourned.